Several hours later, the train had moved quite far from the city. Today it was a wonderful day, the sky was clear and even the rainbow had come out. Inside one of the carriages was Sheng, and his eyes were filled with fatigue and sadness. He began to look at the ground and became lost in his thoughts. Behind him stood Guo Ying with her arms behind her back. With a nervous look, she started to observe Sheng and couldn't help but start trembling. She couldn't believe that she had been assigned to help someone as strong and powerful as our boy. Feeling her nervousness, Sheng turned his head back and started to observe her with a serene look. He had no idea why she was so nervous. Sheng changed his thoughts, let out a sigh, began to look at her with a kind gaze, and with a smile explained that the trip was going to be long and also asked her not to be so nervous. Upon hearing this, Guo Ying's eyes filled with confusion, causing her to start sweating even more and become even more nervous. The reality was that she had been told that Sheng was an extremely terrifying guy and his orders must be obeyed unconditionally. She did not know exactly what this mission was. Due to her nervousness, she responded with a yes, and seeing this, our boy decided not to insist any further. He took a glass of water, brought it close to his mouth, closed his eyes, and began to drink. Upon seeing this, Guo Ying calmed down a bit. She started observing him and remained thinking in silence. Several seconds passed, and while Sheng was drinking water, Guo Ying let out a sigh of relief. With a calm look, she thought that the rumors were somewhat exaggerated since Sheng had a calm attitude. This made her stop being nervous. With a cheerful expression, she looked aside to observe the landscape through the train window. However, something strange was happening as outside the air turned orange. Upon witnessing what was happening, Guo Ying's eyes filled with surprise and she couldn't help but be shocked. Out of nowhere, in front of the high-speed train, evil energy began to emerge, and this energy formed the face of a demon with sharp teeth, who opened its mouth and started to roar. Guo Ying and the other passengers on the train could not help but start to feel fear as no one knew what this was. Guo Ying went on alert, and her eyes filled with panic. She turned to Sheng and asked him to evacuate the train quickly since there was an S-level threat in front of them. But once she turned back to the seat where Sheng was sitting, she saw that he had disappeared. She was shocked and with a confused look began to wonder what was happening and where he had gone. The energy that had formed the face of the demon became giant and it began to approach quickly towards the train. But at that moment, Sheng got out of the train, jumped and prepared to fight and discover what was happening and who was responsible behind this. Sheng clenched his fist tightly, used the ability called Star Punch, and his fist began to emit a powerful golden energy. He started to observe the demon with a determined look, and with a smile mocked the person who was behind this, asking if they hadn't arrived a little late. Despite the fact that the energy was strong, obviously the demon was no match for someone as strong as Sheng. He moved at light speed, and in an instant, pierced through the figure of the demon using his fist, causing it to shatter into pieces. While the pieces of energy from the demon were falling to the ground, Sheng's fist began to emit the same energy as the demon. He started to look down and couldn't help but smile. In a matter of seconds, the figure of the demon broke into small pieces which slowly began to disappear into the air. Guo Ying approached the train window, rested her hands on it, and looking up at the sky, she saw Sheng flying in the air. Her eyes filled with confusion and she couldn't help but be left speechless. She didn't know what was happening and thought someone was filming a movie in the area. Sheng, who was flying in the air, turned his head back and upon seeing her, he couldn't help but smile. With a confident look, he asked her to wait on the train for a moment since he was going to do something important and wouldn't take long to return. Upon seeing Sheng, Guo Ying couldn't help but panic and start sweating. She was left speechless as she remembered that they were on a high-speed train which was in motion. Her eyes filled with surprise upon seeing that Sheng could fly and keep up with the speed of the train. Next to the train tracks, there were some electricity poles. On one of the poles stood a mysterious person. Sheng began to scan the area, and upon sensing a mysterious aura, he looked to one side and saw the mysterious person. With a confident look, he concluded that this person was who had created the figure of the demon. The mysterious person quickly realized that he had been discovered. He was a man with orange hair. While his body was emitting a suffocating energy, he placed his hand over his chest, bowed his head before Sheng as a form of respect, and apologized. Upon seeing that our boy could walk on air, he realized that he was a psychic master. According to him, our boy was someone very interesting. Sheng remained calm, began to observe the man, and with a tranquil expression asked if he had come alone. The man raised his head, started to stare intently at Sheng with a penetrating gaze, began to bite his tongue, and with a smile asked if Sheng thought that attack had been the best attack of all, revealing that he only wanted to kill him in a simple and straightforward way. He did not expect this mission to have an unexpected surprise. He brought his hand close to his face and his whole body began to tremble. An evil smile spread across his face and his eyes filled with excitement. Our boy reminded him of those he had met the last time he came to the land of the dragon. They wore uniforms just like Lu Sheng and were also beautiful, young, and brave. Remembering this, the man could not help but lose his composure. He put his hands over his face and could not help but smile like a madman and start to blush. His eyes were filled with emotion as he remembered that they had been tender and fragile like fresh grass stems. For him, tearing them apart had been intoxicating. He started to sweat, stuck out his tongue, began to observe Lu Sheng, and introduced himself as the 9th pillar of the black magic sect called Bamon. Upon hearing this, Lu Sheng began to check his watch and realized that 1 minute and 20 seconds had passed. He clenched his fist, began to observe Bamon, and with a smile mocked him, saying that he talked too much. Upon hearing this, Bamon could not help but become enraged. He clenched his teeth tightly and with a furious look asked Lu Sheng what he had just said. Lu Sheng extended his hand towards him and slowly began to approach him. Bamon's body started to emit a powerful blue energy. He grabbed his shirt with one hand, put the other inside it, began to look at Lu Sheng with an excited gaze, and with a smile mentioned that he was not going to let him have the chance to say his last words. A smile appeared on Bamon's face, and just before he could attack or make a move, something sharp cut his head in half. This had been none other than Lu Sheng. In the blink of an eye, he appeared behind Bamon, and using only his hand, cut the poor Bamon's body in half, leaving him no chance to even react. Bamon's body split in half and began to fall to the ground. Lu Sheng started to observe him and revealed that he had 7 immortal cells and 4 sword techniques in addition to several martial wills. In a matter of seconds, Bamon lost his life. Lu Sheng began to stare at the corpse with a disdainful look and brought his hand close to his face. Lu Sheng was very strong, and for him having to exchange blows with someone like Bamon was an insult. He would rather die than do this. Lu Sheng started touching his forehead with his finger, and with an uncertain look began to wonder what position Bamon had said he occupied in the ranking of the 72 demons. He closed his eyes and concentrated, deciding not to think more on the subject. He began to release his energy to directly perceive if there were any companions of Bamon hidden nearby. He wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to get rid of them. Several seconds later, Lu Sheng opened his eyes and activated the exploration technique. His energy began to expand in all directions until it reached the nearest city. Thanks to this technique, Lu Sheng was able to sense the energy of 4 people hiding inside some buildings. But because they were a bit far away, for our boy it was a little problematic. With a serene look, Lu Sheng decided that it was better to forget about this. According to him, it was better to wait for them to come and attack. And speaking of this, now he really was drifting further and further away from normal people, including ordinary warriors. While the high-speed train was still moving towards its destination, Lu Sheng began to descend. He was about to turn the high-level combat into a fantasy story. Several seconds later, Lu Sheng entered the train again until he reached the carriage where Guo Aiying was. She was crying and very scared. She put her hands close to her chest and couldn't help but feel somewhat relieved to see that Lu Sheng had returned. Upon hearing this, he began to observe her in silence. Lu Sheng returned to his seat, sat down, and while having one hand resting on the arm of the seat, rested his head on the other, closed his eyes and couldn't help but smile. From Bay City to Kyoto province there were more than 8,000 kilometers of distance in total. He was sure that Lion Su would try to kill him somewhere along the way. While Lu Sheng had his head resting on his hand and was lost in thought, Guo Aiying, who was standing behind him, put her hand over her mouth, and her eyes filled with fear, causing her body to start trembling. This train was going at 200 kilometers per hour. She didn't know how Lu Sheng had been able to keep up with the speed of the train. She swallowed hard and began to feel a great pressure. According to her, Lu Sheng was someone too powerful since he could come and go freely. Lu Sheng slightly turned his head back and with a calm expression called her attention. Upon hearing his voice, she snapped out of her trance and couldn't help but feel a chill run through her body. She asked the commander what he wanted. Lu Sheng stood up, approached her, placed his hand on her shoulder and with a smile asked her to wait here as he was going to do something and would be back soon, and also asked her to send the coordinates to the military and ask them to be there. Guo Aiying was paralyzed for several seconds, and responded with a yes. Several minutes passed and she sent the coordinates to the army, then returned to the carriage where Sheng was, started pointing at herself and with an uncertain look asked what she should do now. Upon hearing her voice, Sheng came out of his trance, began observing her with a calm look and mentioned that there was nothing more to do now, it was over, asking her to rest for now since he would let her know if there were any changes. After saying this, Sheng turned his back to her and began to walk away from her. Her gaze filled with confusion. She was left speechless as she couldn't believe that it was over. She started to imagine herself as a little girl, and Sheng petting her head and offering a small orange. The tone of our boy had been as casual as the one her father would use while she was at the station, asking her to wait while he went to buy some oranges. At the same time, in some dark place, there was a screen on which a notification appeared with the image of Bamon. This was Jay's lair. Upon seeing this, he couldn't help but panic, and his eyes filled with panic. He couldn't believe that Bamon's signs of life had completely disappeared. The woman wearing the sexy dress was somewhat surprised. She stood up, approached him and with an incredulous look asked how this could have happened. Jay remained lost in his thoughts. His eyes were full of fear and confusion. He couldn't believe that Bamon was dead. The woman turned her back to him, started running and with a serious look decided to go inform the master and gave Jay the order to continue monitoring. Jay turned back and responded with a yes. The woman took out her mobile, made a call, and despite the fact that she did not know how to explain this to the master, with an alert look she revealed that Bamon was dead. The way was unclear, they had to be careful, since this time the objective did not seem as simple as they thought. Her master was a blonde woman. She brought her hand to her mouth and with a smile explained that she was not as stupid as Bamon. She explained that although the Dragon Nation was very weak, he had made a lot of noise last time. He had been the center of attention for a long time, and now he had tried to walk so challengingly, so it was normal that he was dead. She could not help but start laughing, and her body began to emit a blue energy. She assured that before tomorrow morning she would be back with the head of the target. After this, the woman hung up the call. The woman wearing the red dress started to look at her phone and decided to trust her. In front of her was a table that had a wanted poster with Sheng's photo. She began to look at it. Just seeing his photo made her feel an inexplicable kind of fear. She remembered that he was just a 20-year-old genius in martial arts, so she didn't know why she felt this way. She started to imagine Sheng reaching out his hand towards her. They were supposed to be the hunters, but she felt as if it were they who were being stalked by death. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.